alluding to this meeting for this morning, we'd like to be able to share with you the rough draft of our final report, which we are tracking for delivery in the coming, week or so. Jeff, thank you for your efforts in this dynamic duo here. So I'll turn to you to see if you wanted to share and bring it up, or if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'll share. I actually thought I was, because it's on my other screen. There we go. So as Jackie said, we've been working on getting the report going. I will send this out to to all of you when we're done with the meeting. Today, I'd like to focus on discussing the recommendations part of it. It does follow the outline that we discussed at our last meeting. We've got our introduction. We'll obviously create an executive summary when it's done and put that first. Introduction to Industry 4.0, just to make sure everybody's level set on that. And then just a short review of our charge. Obviously people can go to the legislation itself to see the details, an overview of the working group makeup. Pardon me. Just a quick review. We'll put the catalog of service providers in the appendix. So that's something that Constep has that we'll put in there. And then a review of our work on the Industry 4.0 ecosystem, the process map, the customer journey, some information on the gap analysis, and awareness and outreach. And then a list of recommendations. And so what I'd really like to do is give you a chance to look at these and then discuss those for today and see what we think about them. And I'll let the fast readers start the conversation when they've got something.
Jeff, can you just fill me in on the scorecard a little bit? What's that benchmarking? Is that has to do with how many companies are actually adopting 4.0?
So the ask here would be to determine what that scorecard is, but yes, it would be something like that. How do we measure success in Connecticut, and making sure we have some definition of success and something that is aligned with either what other states are doing or industry practices.
Great, thanks.
Jeff, time back into that, do you have benchmark data on what other states are using for measurement of a scorecard? Like, is one robot somewhere in a back room constitute Industry 4.0 adoption, or kind of what does that look? Do we have any benchmark data on how that's measured and what that looks and feels like?
Yeah, so I don't think we have anything comprehensive. Certainly, Constep has some information on what other MEPs are doing, but the ask here would be to come up with something that was Connecticut based, but fit into something that showed where other states were going with that kind of question.
There's part, like I like on a scorecard that that we measure different factors. Perhaps one is a measurement of the volume of awareness that we create. Then a measurement on to the extent that we provide training, support, or consulting. So maybe that's a feedback loop from some of our partners on this as to who's engaged. So, a kind of a level of engagement on moving the ball forward. And that could be multiple things: requests for serious assessments, engagement with strategic partners, kind of fruition on that as precursors, because there's still a lot of groundwork to be laid in this area. So some of our initial, measures of success may be, in fact, penetration of awareness and knowledge too.
Maybe that could be in the form of like a radar map with all the different technologies being like spokes of that, so we could see where our strengths and where weaknesses, and if you overlaid the awareness or the adoption versus the support kind of things, you could do gap analysis that way.
Yeah, I like that. Each of the 9 technologies that was portrayed becomes a spoke and then a measurement of where we are on those 9 key technologies. That's, general awareness, training, and deployment, kind of as the 3, and as the 3 bars on the radar. That could work. That's very visual.
And just to add, I really like where this discussion's going. And I think one of the things early on in these discussions, we talked about like kind of the stair-step journey approach. So if we do that visual, do we put things in different colors, meaning this is basic. The green ones are kind of the first stair step, then it gets progressively more advanced. And then we can even start to measure companies where they are in each of those steps of the journey, which I think would be really neat.
Yeah, the nice thing about the radar format is that you're moving constantly to a concentration of effectiveness. That's kind of cool. You get to the center, you hit it. I know on the focus areas, and Paul has articulated this to a large degree, that some of these focus areas are really coming down as mandates on that. And first one that catches my eye is broad adaptation of model-based definition. And again, we highlight that into the supporting requirements for Department of Defense. And I've had this conversation a couple of weeks ago with Ron, and there's a level of awareness that PTA as an SMM. I kind of looked at that model-based definition being out something that was kind of for the big 3 and their tier 1 suppliers. But as we got an opportunity to participate in some things up at CCAP, there's elements of that can be impactful on our everyday way of doing business, and how do is model-based definition just looks arcane to small and mid-sized manufacturers. We kind of know, but then we talk to some of Ron and Jackie's team and say, holy cow, shit, there's a lot we can do with this, and it can make our life better and easier and higher quality product delivered faster. And I don't need the ocean of model-based definition, at least in the onset. There's pieces of that I call out. And how do we create that kind of awareness? Or is that even part of a mission here? And is that just getting too granular for what this report needs to deliver? But, and there's, again, the high emphasis on additive. And again, that for us is a piece of the 7 technologies that we're exploring. It comes up to the top of this list, and if that's mandated, that it be at the top of the list, so be it. But that's not a one-size-fits-all application.
Yeah, Mike, to that point, my vision on model-based definition goes far beyond the programmatic requirements of Department of Defense. So, if you look at the defense industry in Connecticut, we certainly have to do that. But I want to be able to take the best pieces of model-based definition and apply that through the entire supply chain. So if there's 4,400 manufacturers and there's 700 in the defense supply chain, there's 3,700 other manufacturers that are going to use some pieces and parts of this. Right? You're not required to do all of it, but there's going to be some things there that are truly game changers for your operation. And that's my 3.0, right? So my 3.0 is exactly what you just talked about. Sikorsky's 3.0 and Pratt and Whitney and Raytheon and General Dynamics Electric Boats 3.0 is their entire supply chain.
Right.
That's great. I'm happy for you. Go ahead and put it in Maryland. I really, I'm done. I want to go back to Connecticut and take care of Connecticut. So, I think when we look at model-based definition, I look at it through this, I would like every manufacturer in Connecticut to have whatever they feel fits best of that technology to be able to drive efficiency, effectiveness, and overall quality and shorter lead time. So I would, if you want to look at this line here, this is actually we call it DMI 2.0 is for the programmatic requirements of the Department of Defense. 3.0 is the rest of the Connecticut supply chain.
And I'm hoping we can get something that resonates not only with the legislature, but as this is rolled out to the manufacturing community broadly. And I don't know, can there be either another bullet or a sub bullet and its applicability across all of model-based definition or elements of model-based definition beyond Department of Defense requirements, so that there's a carrot there, there's something that we or that other 3,300 manufacturers see, that there is potential benefit from.
So Mike, listening to you and it sounds like, do we need two bullets, or can we just extract the focus on Department of Defense here and include some kind of clause that connotes, a broader audience and somehow intimates that there are, model-based definition is kind of a universe of a variety of elements that can be helpful. Because I'm one of the things I worry about with this is exactly the impression you had, before you talk to CCAP, which is you read that bullet and you say, oh yeah, great, this is the big guys and their suppliers, has nothing to do with me. So I'd love to have a bullet that would kind of help dissuade that.
Yeah, and I would argue that there's this is actually, we're talking about advanced manufacturing technologies. Digital transformation is an industry 4.0 bucket, if you will. Model-based definition is under that bucket. And then we have Department of Defense requirements, but then we also have every other manufacturer in Connecticut can get a benefit from it. So there's kind of this hierarchy of, I think we should use the word digital transformation. I think we should talk about model-based definition. Then I think we should talk about Department of Defense. And then we should talk about applicability towards the entire manufacturing supply chain in Connecticut. So I would look at that as almost kind of a 4-phase, 4 bullet points, if you will. Digital transformation, MBD, DOD, MBD, rest of the supply chain.
Yeah, and it takes on a whole different purview from my perspective when you up at a level to digital transformation as opposed to leading with model-based definition and supported defense. It looks, right, feels, the relevancy is regained at that point,
Right. If you say model-based definition, Department of Defense, we're going to lose 3,000, we're going to lose 4,000 manufacturers right off the bat. They're going to say, oh, not me,
Yeah, and that was kind of the point I was trying to make, maybe.
Yep,
not,
and I don't want, and
not as concisely, but.
Right, and to your point, Mike, there are pieces of model-based definition that will be very, very valuable to non-defense manufacturers, so.
So I can certainly broaden the language here to talk about manufacturers in general. I would challenge a little that I'm not sure I'm on the same page as Paul on the continuum of digital transformation to model-based definition. I think digital transformation to me sounds much broader.
It is. That's what I said, Jeff. I said it is broader.
No, wait, hold on, Paul.
Model-based definition is just an element of it, so.
I agree with that, but I'm not sure it's in its breadth, it has enough definition to be a single enabling technology.
That's probably a fair statement, Jeff. That's a category, not a technology.
Well, is that more of some kind of an issue that could be dealt with more in prose above this? Is it broad enough to be part of the sort of the overall setting the table?
Well, so my point on this is that people say implement Industry 4.0. That means nothing. When you say that, that means nothing. Implement Industry 4.0. Well, what does that mean? What are the buckets of Industry 4.0? Digital transformation is one of the, excuse me, I'll use Mike words. What's the category of Industry 4.0? Digital transformation is a category. Additive manufacturing is a category. Cybersecurity is a category. Under that category, there are initiatives that we can implement, like model-based definition. So I think, we have to, adoption of Industry 4.0. What does that mean? I mean, that, Industry 4.0 is not it's a overall umbrella that has certain categories. We have to look at those 8 or 9 categories that are made up of what is regularly identified as Industry 4.0 technologies. And then under those regularly recognized Industry 4.0 technologies, talk about what we're doing. Additive is one of those Industry 4.0 technologies.
Yeah, and Paul, I completely agree. I think that was, just stepping back, one of the things that this committee was charged to do. And I've been, just transparently struggling a little bit with, where we're heading with this report, because I don't see it broken down into those silos of opportunities of Industry 4.0, and then able to align back out into the manufacturers on where they are in their journeys in relation to the need of those different silos. So I think this is a very good discussion.
Is there a potential here, Jeff, and I know you're the report preparer, but we create kind of a different visual. If you had up above a visual of the 9 manufacturing technologies. So is this become something where we take that and you kind of highlight those out, pull them down below, and then
and let me go up there
and then feed back out to who the constituents are and where the benefits of those come, so that we tie it, rather than being 4 pages up, we kind of take that and you change the color of 4 of those that are in your focus areas, initial focus areas,
and let me
drive
go
it
up
back out.
Let me go up a little so you guys can read through. This is what we wrote for those technologies. And while the diagram shows, those 9 things, actually, I guess I will highlight that how I put cybersecurity in there too. Though the diagram shows the 9 things, because that was a diagram we easily could grab, I had intended to replace it with something that was more reflective of this paragraph. And so I'll let you guys look at that paragraph and see what you think.
Yeah. Again, I like the visual piece. I like the icons. I like, when I'm presenting it, create the picture. If I can create the picture rather than reading a lot of the words, can we get to a page that says, okay, I got this picture of what the world of this looks like, and you turn 3 of those that are the focus areas, instead of being blue, they're red because they're hot, and those come down into a below it. And then, here's the constituents and the beneficiaries of that initial focus. Just a thought on a way to create the message we're trying to create. But
so guys, I don't think this is going to be popular, but I'm going to say it anyway because I'm that kind of guy. So we seem to be focusing a lot on the attractive and the sexy, and it's like, let's get a robot that can do backflips and it's going to be awesome, and additive manufacturing, we can print an arm. But to me, I don't care as much of how everybody's adopting the 9. I think there's only 2 that matter right now. And the 2 that matter right now are cybersecurity and data analytics. Because if you don't have the data and you're not analyzing that, how do you know that you even need a robot? Because Industry 4.0 is everywhere, and it's something that we have to adopt across the broad spectrum. But not everybody needs a robot. Not everybody needs additive manufacturing. Not everybody is going to need model-based definition. All of these things have super value to the people that need it. But I'm speaking for the people that are not enlightened, because everybody on this call right now is enlightened. We understand what's out there. We know the benefits. We know in our business what maybe that we need. Maybe some of us don't. But I would like us to have more of a focus rather on than implementation. Take a step back and let's look at like Siri assessments more, and let's look at education more, and then focus on implementation. Because if we're out there championing everybody go get a 3D printer and then it sits unused, then what did we really do except waste people's time and money? So I think that we need to refocus a little bit and step back and slow down a little bit and say, hey guys, let's focus on data collection, data analyzation, and cybersecurity. Because if you have all of your money in robots and none of your money in cybersecurity, then you're going to regret it.
Charles, for what it's worth, I think I agree at least 95% with you. Again, I don't know if I asked in the chat if there's more recommendations below. But to me, focusing this on, MBD and 3D printing, I think that's very narrow, and I think it, well, I'll leave it at that. But I agree with what you're saying. And maybe there's stuff in pros above, but the stuff about getting companies, educated and doing the analysis of whether and how and to what extent i4.0 can be helpful to them. I agree with you that should be more prominent in my view.
Well, I mean, listen, it's the communication part of all of this and the education part is extremely important. We need to engage, educate, and enable manufacturers on this technology. I will tell you that, Charles, you're right. From an overall perspective, those are areas of key focus that we should be looking at. But to the degree that you want this report to be in line with and to support the strategic plan for manufacturing for the state of Connecticut, understand that model-based definition and additive manufacturing are non-negotiable. The Department of Defense is mandated that model-based definition will be used in all defense work. And the Columbia class of the electric boat submarines have been all designed with model-based systems engineering and model-based definition. So if the supply chain in Connecticut is not model-based definition enabled, the supply chain will leave Connecticut. So if you think that model-based definition is not important, you might want to rethink that. Secondly, the same thing with additive manufacturing. There is significant work being done in the aerospace industry around additive. And if it's not done in Connecticut, Ron Angelo, it's going to be done somewhere else. And Ron and I are going to make sure that it's done here in Connecticut. So,
all right. Well, let's be frank and candid about it. Let's be frank and candid about it. Okay, the purpose of this was not to support the strategic plan. This was an independent report. Model-based. I don't think anybody, Charles or anybody else, said model-based definition isn't important, nor additive. But the purpose of this is not to support the strategic plan and the initiatives that are the priority at CCAT and the aerospace industry. That's the big concern. The last meeting we had at the Capitol, I didn't say anything, but there was some real concern there about as important as the aerospace industry is, this has to come across as being broader than that. And it's fine to absolutely model-based definition and 3D printing should be part of it. But this isn't designed to support, CCAT and its work and the Department of Defense's should be consistent with it, but it's not designed to push it.
Right. I'm saying the same thing. And I understand 100% the value and the freight train that is additive manufacturing and model-based definition. I understand it 100%. I do. And everybody on this call does. But if we're Oprah Winfrey and everybody gets a 3D printer, I think it's lost. We have to take a step back and say, here's why you need to do this, and here's how you can use it. And if this report doesn't highlight and emphasize the need for the understanding and the training and the deployment, rather than you need to get this, then it's going to be disastrous. And I don't use that word lightly, but this is what happens: is we find a shiny new thing, and and everybody runs out and gets it without knowing why they have it. And I guarantee you right now, there's people that have 3D printers sitting in the corner, robots sitting in the closet. They got it because they didn't understand it, and it is a shame. And so what I'm advocating is that Industry 4.0 is big data and analyzation of that, but nobody ever talks about that. Nobody wants to stand up and talk about cybersecurity because it's not sexy, but 3D printing is. So all I'm advocating for is that we first educate people on this before jumping right to implementation. That's all I'm saying.
Charles, I would just argue that there are plenty of small manufacturers out there not too familiar with all this stuff, who cybersecurity absolutely is a big concern and a big barrier to them even, looking into this further. So,
and can I just add one comment as a supplier into the DoD? So we're subprime, obviously. We do supply into the likes of Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. I have not had one, and 40% of my business is DoD. I have not had one contract flowed to me that requires additive manufacturing or all my contracts require cyber. So I'm a bit lost on, again, how we're lining these silos to what the businesses really need. I think maybe Electric Boat and Sikorsky have to have the additive, because it's in their contracts. It's not being flown to me in any of my contracts. So have we gone out and canvassed Aerospace Alley's sub-tier suppliers and asked them if it's being flown to them? I'm not sure. It sounds like it is, Paul, but not in my business.
I mean, I'm in the same place, NIST 800-171. That's a flow through.
Yeah, I have to be NIST CMMC. That's a $300,000 journey I'm on. We've already invested $200,000 into it, but not the other two that you're speaking of.
So again, you got hands up. What? Sorry.
Mark first, then Brian.
Okay, I'd just like to say that as we adopt these technologies, if we think we have a workforce that's prepared to adopt these technologies, we're kidding ourselves. We're doing a lot of backslapping about how great we are, and our community colleges are number one, but we're not preparing the workforce for these technologies. And I think one of the recommendations of this needs to be that we need to be upping our game at the technical training level to prepare the workforce for these technologies, regardless of which one, all of them. If we're going to be able to adopt them, we can recommend all we want, but if companies don't have the talent or the resources to adopt them, they're going to have to put those 3D printers in the closet. And, I just think that one of the focus areas needs to be on the technical education and at a higher level than we're currently doing. I'm done.
No, Mark, I agree with you. Workforce comes before innovation. I mean, you can't implement innovation into a workforce that's not ready, that's absolutely not ready to accept it. I wholeheartedly agree with you. But again, you go back to the what's the purpose of this report? So the purpose of this report is to advise the legislature on Industry 4.0 technologies and what should be our approach. I mean, what's our ask of the legislature? Is there an ask, or is this just an inform? If it's an inform, we should talk about cybersecurity. We should talk about big data. We should talk about I don't see I don't see in your list that digital transformation is even an Industry 4.0 category. So
yeah, and I made a note of that as how I better reflect that.
Yeah, no, and so, but I just, so then where's, you know, we have to, you know, we have to kind of figure out that as well. And listen, we can't, you know, I could make an argument for 100 different technologies that we should be implementing at thousands of manufacturers across the state, right? There is no one size fits all. But, you know, we have to look at, you know, we have to look at focus and we have to look at buckets, and we can't, you know, we can't sit here and say that we can be everything to everyone. And, you know, we can argue about what the priorities are, and I'm, you know, and I shouldn't say argue, we can discuss and debate, and I'm open to discussing and debating anything as to what the priorities are. But there are, you know, I mean, there, you know, the reality of this is that we need to take a look at some of the things that are happening today, but we have to look at things that are going to happen 5 or 10 years from now. You know, the future's already happened, and we need to make sure that we're even staying pace with the future, and we're not. We're falling behind, and that's, I think, the purpose of this, is to say we need to have renewed focus to make sure that we are going to catch up, but more important than we're going to catch up is we're going to close the gap between where technology is going today, where it is being implemented in the manufacturing industry, and how our supply chain can be ready and resilient to make sure that we're going to be relevant tomorrow, and then the next day, and the next day, and then 10 years from now, and 15 years from now. So, and then, you know, and then guess what? You know, along will come Industry 5.0, and we're gonna be addressing that. So, you know, I think to the degree that we educate and inform the legislature of the total scope of what it is that we're facing as it relates to transforming the supply chain by using advanced technologies, I think that's you know, that's a worthy goal for this project, is to be able to do that, and then we can come back around with initiatives, strategic initiatives, and tactical programs to address it. I mean, we'd love to have a program around cybersecurity, love to have a program around big data, love to have a program around additive, love to have a program around model-based definition. Pick a few others too, but, you know, I don't have unlimited resources, nor do I have unlimited budgets to be able to address these. So that's where we have to get back to a prioritization process.
So Paul, but it's still going back to what started this, you know, this particular part of the conversation is what Mark said. And I just want to weigh in that absolutely the current state of our education and our untrained workers needs to be part of this document, because it is, you know, it's absolutely the ground zero for all this. If you want to talk about the first 15% from a Deming perspective, our current state, which is our tiny little pathetic bare bones mechatronics programs, one really good you know, robotics automation program at Central Connecticut State College, and that's it, compared to, you know, states that are, you know, in most people's minds, nowhere close to where we are from a technology standpoint, have way better programs. So that has to be part of it.
So it sounds to me like there's some divergence in viewpoints, which is understandable, about the scope and the focus of the report. I don't know, Jeff, can you scroll back up to, I think it was very near the top, which was the legislative directives on the report itself, or the working group itself, I should say, where it talks about the report.
So here I condensed it to one paragraph, and we can pull up the actual language if people are interested.
Yeah, well, I think it talked about, or at least the intention was talk about an ecosystem. And I think that's where we're, you know, some of the things Charles mentioned about, you know, getting assessments done and education and things of that, and even potentially workforce. Although I know we didn't want to turn this into a workforce working group, but certainly it bears, it's certainly a key piece of the puzzle. So I just think maybe that's where we're struggling here. Is this kind of a focused list of asks for the legislature based on what's happening in Connecticut now, or is it more of a holistic? How do we create an efficient and effective 4.0 ecosystem in the state that's accessible, efficiently accessible for the broad manufacturing community, no matter what aspect of manufacturing they're in? In my own view, it was the latter.
There's nothing wrong with having, a report that answers directly our mandate and having an addendum to that report that also addresses some of the immediate challenges, barriers, and shortfalls that are going to be needed to be addressed.
Good point. Yeah.
And also, I think it would be great to mention in there somewhere the need for K through 12 education to adopt these technologies. That's, I think, something that we really need. If we want a 3D printer in every company, first of all, I would like to see a 3D printer in every elementary school. I think that's the way that we prepare for this. And also, it's more of like a mindset. So like Paul said, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it might be completely different. We have Industry 5.0, but we want to get the education system in this mindset of preparing students for tomorrow's jobs, not today's or even sometimes yesterday's jobs. So I would love to see K through 12 education mentioned somewhere in there, and the need for them to adopt that, because I think that's critical. Because I could tell you guys a story about a bull and his son walking down to a field of cows, but it wouldn't be appropriate for this group. But I think a lot of times we rush into something when, if we take a little bit of time, we can do something the right way and more widespread.
Kathy, go ahead. Actually, before you go, Kathy, Brian, did you ever say what? Your hands down, but
yeah, no, I didn't say anything yet. Because what I was going to talk about was where Paul started going, because I was going to ask what the actual intention of the report was, because seemed to be debating just relative to the bullet points that we were highlighting, not necessarily what's encapsulated in the whole report. And so my feeling is that it's not up to us or the report to push any one Industry 4.0 initiative or another. Now, except where Paul's talking about if there's some non-negotiables that have to be in the report, then they have to be in the report. But at the end of the day, we went into this talking about the assistance and the promotion of the tools to the small and medium-sized manufacturers. So what I would have liked to have seen in that lower section where you were on before, Paul, was I didn't see anything in there as a key highlight about the assistance. I see promotion, we see some of the tools, but we spent a lot of time on the assistance throughout the course of this, but I don't see that in there at all. So my question was going to be more along the lines of, what are we debating here? Are we debating what to put as another bullet point or remove a bullet point? Or are we debating what's in the content of the report?
Yeah, again, you go back, upon reflection here, right? I mean, we go back to the original intent of the report. Are we trying to make this report into something bigger? Are we trying to take it outside of what we've been charged to do? And I'm obviously guilty of doing that. So, it probably is based on trying to seize an opportunity where I'm going to have the attention of the people that I really need the attention of to make sure that we're moving manufacturing forward. So I can do that at a different time and in a different manner. So I think if we go back to simplify this and go back to the overall intent of this report, then we should be taking a look at the ecosystem and taking a look at the value stream map. And then from there, I think I know Senator Hartley well enough to know that she's going to ask that question, and that question is going to be, well, where do we go from here? So, and maybe that where do we go from here is covered in the manufacturing strategic plan. It doesn't need to be in this Industry 4.0 working group report. And so, maybe we need to simplify.
Yeah,
not
and
complicate.
right. I agree with that, Paul. And, because at the end of the day, what we as small and medium-sized manufacturers need to know is what's coming down the line, what's being pushed down from the DoD, what's being pushed down from the OEMs. And it becomes up to us as the business owners and business leaders to determine what we want to adopt and how much we want to be in business with the future. And so I think it becomes the responsibility now of this group and this report to say, okay, here's what's coming down the line, and here are the resources and the processes available for assistance and promotion within the state. And I agree with what Charles and others are talking about. There are a lot of things that go along with this that, what's right for Habco and what I choose to do for an implementation of Industry 4.0 is not necessarily what's right for WEPCO, right? So we just need to know what's available, what the process is, and the resources available to help us decide.
Okay, I'm going to go to Kathy because she had her hand up before and I bypassed her.
Actually, I was just about what Brian was saying. So.
Okay. All right, Mike.
Yeah, I sort of, a little bit of Brian, a little bit of Paul, and if we just what you portrayed, Jeff, on the deliverables, you've captured exactly the deliverables. And is there a section of this says, hey, the other benefit of this effort was, as we convened all the constituents that you listed, we learned a lot. We learned our, some of our known knowns, we learned some of our known unknowns, and we identified that there's probably a bunch of unknown unknowns, and we'll be back. Is it okay to kind of tie a bow around it that way? That there was an added value to this exercise, and that was and we'll be back to you. Whether it's through Paul, whether it's through, a continuation of the working group doing a report out there's a next phase to this. I don't know what it is, or some combination of strength and numbers delivering the same message. That sort of had a finite end to it, the call out of the requirement on this. So it had a beginning and an end. And we've sort of created something at the end of this that doesn't have an end to it.
That may be the case, Mike. I don't know, but I've heard many on this group and others, maybe even yourself, talk about the urgency of this. So we just have to weigh that. But I understand what you're saying,
that says, hey, this was or in retrospect, this should have had three phases that were on a rapid timeline. We got through one, and we kind of have in this process identified 2 and 3, where they need to go. I don't know,
I think that's definitely the case. I mean, this for me certainly isn't a one and done. I mean, Mark Brzezinski and I are going to be working really, really hard on the education side of this, but all of this needs to continue on, and we may need to add people to the group and everything, but I don't think it's a one and done.
Yeah, if you don't mind, if I try to listen a lot, and I love listening to the manufacturers and the folks on here. Remember, this was just a draft report, and I do have to say, look, Jeff and Jackie have always done a great job trying to pull things together. It was not meant as like the final report. This is what they're working on. So the input of the manufacturers is key. There wasn't one thing stated here. I think that wasn't important, all the way to Charles and Mark and Kathy, you going all the way back. This is going to have to be an evolutionary period of time through the education system, and how do we work all that, and in partnership with everybody. It's things that are going on out there, but for this report, I think we do have to be somewhat focused and simplify. I think Paul LeBoy had just said that in the end, is let's make this thing as simple and clear as possible. I think we know the audience that we need to address on this. So I would say it's just make this concise. I do think getting them to understand, though, I'm not saying the list is good. And I know there was some comment made about this report is along the lines with CCAT's strategy. That's would be a bit disingenuous. Anyone who knows us, we listen to industry, and all we're trying to do is serve the industry. And Mike has seen that firsthand. And we always do that with training, with education. Is not, here's a technology, good luck. That's a complete waste of time, and nobody's even remotely interested in embarking on that journey. So I do think simplifying, I do think talking about i4.0 and somehow making a clearer message around that. But I think we do need to list some of the things. Cyber is front and center on everything. Workforce is front and center on everything. And it may be fine to put that in the report, is that, though there are some overarching things before you even get to the specifics of i4.0 technologies and which ones are best for which companies in which industries. By simply stating that, and assessing where companies are. We know there's a lot, and I think a lot more can go into this report, but simplifying is key. And I do think we need to understand what the chief manufacturing officer and the strategy and other things that are being built. I don't think we want this as an outlier. I think Kathy made the last point. We want this to go to the next version and the next version and the next version. This is not a one and done. It's probably not a 10 and done. If we're all here 10 years from now, God willing, we're probably still going to be talking about advancements in technology and continuing to train the next generation workforce forever. And the best we can do right now, at least what I'd like to see passionately, and I think all of us on this call, Charles says it so well, is we want to build a system, a mechanism, a process that can continue to evolve and address next generation technologies, workforce trainings, education. If we do this as in a bubble now, what's going to happen 10 years from now when the system we have now doesn't work? So I think it behooves us, and certainly the manufacturing leaders on this phone understand a lot of that, and they see what's there. So simplifying the report, I do think working hand in hand with Paul, he's the representative, I think, for much of this. I think we have to look at that in a strategy that's going to be worked on with all of us going forward. So that's my 2 cents after listening for about the last 50 minutes.
Well, you deal a lot with all the, the people in the government. And so I think that, your points are spot on, that it's got to be, concise, but I want that addendum, which is what are the barriers and suggestions as to next step.
Well, that's what needs to be captured in the report, and I guess we're coming up against time, so I want to make sure Jeff and Jackie, if there's anything else on their front, but being concise here, clear, probably simplifying the report in some way, and really, I think the goal for all of us is what's next? What are we asking for of the legislature for next year, and maybe in the years ahead? And I remember even in the working group that we had at the legislature, housing was brought up. So there may be a whole addendum to Kathy's point. Maybe it's affordable housing, and we also have the K through 12, Charles' point. And those are probably a whole bunch of things that are okay to be referenced. But I don't know if we're going to be able to tackle all those. We may have to have some, others in different parts of government and throughout our communities doing some of that. But
the whole industry 4.0 thing really, it's all about data. And the one thing that we really don't have is data on so many of the pieces of this whole puzzle, as far as who has what, who needs what, who has the capability of incorporating what into their business structure and everything else. So, you know, what did Deming say? In God we trust, all others must bring data. I think part of the next steps is going to be collecting data.
And Kathy, we do. I know Constep does as well. Data is huge for us. That's everything we do. And, you know, I don't want to speak for Mike, but part of certainly, I mean, we use this daunting term, model-based definition. It may not resonate as well, but that whole premise is about collecting data and about what to do with it in real time. So maybe we don't do it justice by using that industry term, so to speak, and it is far beyond Department of Defense. It's what it can do to a company's process, doesn't matter what industry you're in, is incredibly beneficial. We'll get there, but it's going to be a journey. And but it is all about data. And if you see what we do, even the summit that we have coming up, it all starts with, if you're not collecting data, you're not managing it, you don't understand what to do with it, don't even bother going to the next step, because you gotta get that under control.
Okay, any other comments? So, you know, been trying to listen so that we can synthesize the ideas of the group and make sure we're reflective of those in the report. And so we'll continue to do that. Our next steps is to get out a firmer draft and send that out so that we can review it. We will probably try to have one last meeting to verify that it's what we're going to send as a final report. I would appreciate, you know, openness in trying to schedule that. We will leave the, I can't do my math, 26 meeting on the calendar, but that will probably, you know, hopefully will be done before then. And then the meetings after that, we probably won't need. So I think, Jackie, correct you with that assessment.
We still have the series that goes out, but let's set ourselves a goal. So to Jeff's point, we'll clean this up a little bit. Thank you all very much for all of your inputs. And, you know, as we send the working draft out, please contribute to, you know, what you believe to be those key focus areas, and pointed, concise statements, right? That we will then roll up.
Hey, Jeff, one other question. I know the stuff up top in the report captures the legislative directive about, you know, the mapping. One of the other directives that may or may not have been in there as you scroll through it was the part about, you know, defining the current ecosystem, if you will, in terms of compiling, you know, the profiles and services that are currently in place. I mean, maybe that's an addendum to or an appendix, but I just was wondering if there's plans to include that element of the work we've been doing.
You know, we'll work through that and get the best we can and figure out how that fits in.
Okay.
And so just reading through the chat, yes, I do plan to send this out. Remember, this is an initial draft, and Jackie and I are continuing to work on it. And so, you know, and if anybody has specific inputs they want to include, let us know or send us those inputs, and we'll work them and synthesize them into the report. All right.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Everyone.
Thank
Great,
you.
thanks, everyone. We appreciate your candid input.
You.